All right. Welcome. We'll let this car pass here. We're out here, end of July 8th, start of July 9th, out in Charlotte, Michigan, filming test episode, essentially, for my new show. If you're new to the channel, basically, well, of course you're going to be new, it's the first time. The idea is, I spend a lot of times in my life, I ingest horror media, I produce horror media, and I watch a lot of our YouTube community out there, share opinions, share reviews, top 10s, and they're always just doing it from, their basement room, their office, what have you. Well, I thought, what, not enough of us get outside. And so I'd start, we can do the same thing, but let's get out, kind of see the world, usually after dark. It's nice and interesting out. And so this test episode, new equipment, I want to try kind of the concept, run through a few different takes on things and see how it works out. And obviously you can see I'm not scripted. I really don't want to try and read a script in the dark while walking. So even fact checking, sometimes it'll be hard to do. But so as far as our subject matter for tonight, we're going to go back 2 Saturdays to my usual Saturday night horror mini marathons. That night I watched 4 films. We're only going to talk about 3. The 4th one I was barely conscious for. So the very first of the night, though, 1983 horror fantasy directed by Michael Mann, The Keep. And this is a movie, it had a very difficult history for releases for the longest time. When I was a kid, I had heard of it, but I never had to see it. You wouldn't find it on television particularly often. You wouldn't find it. It had tape releases, but they were pretty rare. DVD, I think there may have been 1 or 2 official releases globally. For most of us, you had to buy some sort of bootleg or pirate, which is what I owned for years. And it's a remarkable shame. So the movie is based on an earlier novel by F. Paul Wilson, which we'll talk about a little. It's one of the rare moments where I've read the source material and watched the film. And that gets entertaining because Mr. Wilson very much does not like the film. But going back, so the movie is set, I forget if it's 40 or 41, I believe it's 41, so World War II, and a battalion of German soldiers are sent to take hold of a keep in the Carpathian Mountains. While there, strange things start to occur. The place itself is very strange as well. It's inlaid with these very oddly shaped nickel crosses. No one ever stays there, and it was even kind of reversed, more like it was meant to hold something in rather than repel attackers. Even the fact that it's sort of just its base construction, it's all reversed and kind of angled. Yeah, so and the production design on it is incredible, by the way. For a fairly low budget movie in the early 80s, a great deal of the cinematography and the set design, costumes, all that is really remarkable. And even the special effects are surprisingly good, though they struggled with some obvious limitations, especially financial limitations. And apparently their special effects guru died during production and didn't leave proper notes on how certain aspects were supposed to work. But once again, plotline though. So German soldiers going to take this keep, things start to go haywire. They start to get killed one by one by some mysterious unseen force. This eventually draws in a Jewish history professor suffering from various diseases, his daughter, and a man named Glaken, who has like freaky silver eyes and can hypnotize people and things like this. And if you're looking for a more traditional narrative, you're definitely not in the right movie. It barely even has a proper main character. It sort of jumps in focus from the lead German soldier to the professor to Glaken to the daughter. There's no one singular standout in control of the events. Everybody's just kind of caught up in it. And beyond that, explanation is almost non-existent for what's happening. But what makes the movie work is just kind of the mood of it. It's got this crazy score from Tangerine Dream. They did all sorts of scores in the late 70s and early 80s. Most of them I would say bad. But this one, it very much works. It's still corny, very synthesizer based, but really good, very hypnotizing. And the way that ties in with the imagery of the film and the mood of the film, it works. Like, it's well known when you look into the trivia of the film that it was cut drastically short. Like, the original plan was for it to be close to 3 hours, if not longer. And it's only like a 92-minute movie as it stands. For most of the early sections, though, that doesn't really seem to be a problem. It's really only in like the last 20 minutes or so where you really start to see some things that you can just tell as a casual viewer, like, something's missing. You know, they kept something or couldn't film something or what have you. So there's pacing issues in there, but the mood of it, it's kind of a horror lava lamp of a movie. You know, as you view it, you just get more and more sucked into what you're seeing, how it sounds, how it feels. And if you're the person who can just kind of let that be and not worry about, oh, I'm not getting a proper explanation for what this is or why I should be afraid, you know, then it may not work for you in that sense. So I guess it kind of depends on how demanding and literal-minded you are about what you're viewing. As far as it continuing beyond that, though, so like I said, I read the original novel. I think probably 4 or 5 years after I first saw the movie, and so it's been probably close to a decade since I've read the book. So I did have to go on Wikipedia for a little refresher. But from something I automatically remembered, and I find this strange, is for most movies, you know, book to film adaptations, usually the way it works is the film version is the more down-to-earth, realistic, restrained take on the subject matter. And that's generally because of limitations, be it financial, technological, oftentimes both. In the case of The Keep, though, it kind of feels like the reverse. The book plays everything a bit more straight-faced. It explains everything far too well. And even just basic choices, like the main hero's super weapon is a sword in the book, whereas in the film, it's some sort of laser spear. You know, everything in the movie is just that slightly bit more amped up and strange, which for me worked better. I kind of prefer seeing that one where you're not 100% certain what's going on, why it's going on, but it's all very intriguing and different. Whereas in the book, it's basically vampires, just not quite as bloody, you know. And so I say that knowing that F. Paul Wilson has a huge fan base, and that beyond that, even he's got, I don't know how many books within that series. That's the Adversary Cycle, and that ties into his Repairman Jack books at some point. So, you know, you don't want to criticize it too much, because I know there's folks out there who love it, but when I read it, I was like, oh, this is that rare occasion where I'll take the movie. Takes less time, gives me more of interest. And so, as far as storytelling, though, and characterization, you're not getting as much, though the movie does excel in one element that a lot of World War II based films don't, and actually just kind of showing the variety of personality types. Because obviously you're dealing with, notice I keep calling them German soldiers, because it's, you know, YouTube. If you let that certain word go, I'm sure somebody will have a problem. But they show kind of a selection. There's German soldiers who are they're in the fight because they're German. There's ones that are in the fight just because, you know, they needed a job, or there's like the crazy true believer types. And so you actually get kind of a wide range of personalities, and that allows you to humanize more, you know, with characters that would otherwise usually be completely despicable or unrelatable. And that is important, since your hero is a silver-eyed, seemingly immortal Scott Glenn, which, yeah, tying into another fun aspect of the movie is the cast, because outside of him as the Glaken, you have Jurgen Prochnow and Gabriel Byrne as the two main soldiers. Trying to remember, Ian McKellen is the professor, initially in old people makeup, which is kind of weird. So you see him young and he's still all dusty and wrinkled. So you've got him. Even some of just the bit players are people that you will recognize from a lot of other productions. And so, it's an excellent cast too. Like I said, it does suffer from, there are pacing issues, and it can just be very strange and kind of uninvolving to some people. Personally though, something I wanted to do within this series is kind of construct a horror essentials block. Everybody wants to do like their top 100 or something. I would make it that set limited at the moment, but just those real essentials, something that like, this is excellent, everyone should visit it, everyone should see it. And I think The Keep, even with its issues, still fits into that. So that would be my first inductee into the list while we're doing this, because it's a crazy movie, even with as slow paced as it can be. I've seen it 5 or 6 times already. It's always entertaining, and right now I'm looking to spread the love on it, because like I said, for years I had a bootleg DVD. Recently I finally upgraded to the really nice official 4K release from Vinegar Syndrome. So now I can take that bootleg, put it in one of those, sidewalk libraries, maybe swap it out for something else, and somebody can discover a really, really interesting movie. But that was the first feature of the night. The second feature was actually kind of a weird watch for me. It was the 1990, I think you look up on IMDb, it says 97, but it was released in 98. American remake of Nightwatch. Which I already hate the fact that I have like 3 or 4 movies in my horror collection with that same title. So this late 90s remake was directed by the original Danish filmmaker who made the original in 1994. And I just saw the original and its sequel. It was like 20-year later sequel. Actually, wait, 30 years later, I think, sequel. They released a Arrow double feature Blu-ray last year. And so I had watched those just last fall. And they're, very much in that okay camp. Because they're kind of odd movies. They're essentially more thriller than straight horror movie. Kind of murder mystery. Only there's not much of a mystery, because it's more like there's a murderer happening at the same time, almost as like kind of a really sleazy slacker comedy. And that's sort of what makes the original and that remake kind of unique, is that weird kind of slacker approach, because you'll have the main character who works as a night watchman at mortuary. Basically, the county morgue. And he's getting spooked at night and strange things are happening. But then the next scene will be him and his buddy out getting drunk, daring each other to do something, picking up a prostitute, things like that. And going into this remake, I had always kind of heard that it was just kind of weird, because the director and a lot of the actors claimed that that this remake version was heavily edited by producers after the fact. It was all messed up, and it was all screwed up, and it's totally different from what was originally intended. When you watch them side to side, though, they're basically the exact same film. The key difference between the original and the remake is that the remake ditches more of that slacker comedy kind of stuff and then slaps on a different opening and ending. Otherwise, the events you're watching, even down to basic dialogue exchanges, is almost exactly the same, as much as you can get between Danish and English, naturally. But so for the plotline of the film, though, as I mentioned, it's a little bit aimless. So you have Ewan McGregor, this is when he was kind of first taken off. He had been showing up in things overseas and all that thing, like Train Spotting, and he was kind of taken off. And I guess that was sort of the thing. He wanted to do something kind of small, basic. So just doing this, little thriller. But, his character in the film is a college student, takes the night watchman job, but he ends up getting wrapped into this whole sequence of events involving a serial killer who keeps going after women and then taking their eyeballs. Which, so for more horror stuff, you can trace it more to the giallo kind of stuff. The old Italian murder mysteries. But once again, not with that tone. So with the remake, it kind of continued the interesting cast concept from the previous movie, because you had Ewan McGregor, you have Patricia Arquette rocking the world's ugliest haircut. I mean, my God. It kind of looks like those bad Jimmy wigs from 28 Years Later, only it's actually hair. You have Josh Brolin as Ewan McGregor's best friend, who is a potential suspect because he's a very strange person. You got Nick Nolte as main police inspector. You have John C. Reilly uncredited, which is really strange, as sort of his partner, or just, I'm not really sure if they're supposed to be partners or just on the same case. The movie's written a little strangely that way. But watching it, like I said, it's one thing to watch a remake anyway, but it's even more so when it's, something that you just watched last year, and for it to be so similar. Then you go back and you watch this, so a lot of it just comes down to execution and style, and that does kind of make a difference for me. And I think on a technical level, probably of the actual story you're being delivered and how it's delivered, I would probably say that the original Danish movie is better. That being said, I liked the remake a little bit more because of the tone shift. The way it's filmed and edited, and even the way the music is put in, it plays out more like the late 90s, early 2000s kind of Dimension and Miramax style horror movies, which it is one of those. And as obnoxious as that style could be back then, it's actually kind of nice to go back and just see it, every so often. It's actually kind of nostalgically comforting now. And having that darker atmosphere and having it lean a little bit more into the horror elements, I thought made the movie more enjoyable. And the new ending kind of did a better job at tying together the boys' friendship than the original ending does, which is this just absolute comedy bit. So, that being said, though, like I said kind of earlier mentioning the other two, I don't think any film in the series is particularly great. None of them are particularly awful, mind you. I'd say probably that recent sequel was the absolute weakest version, the worst entry. But even that's watchable. Of course, we'll come back and talk about those ones another day. But yeah, for the late 90s Nightwatch remake, my recommendation for people would be if you're in the mood for that, you've seen, your fair share of Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, even, is it that kind of more sleek late 90s, slightly more expensive studio horror. Yeah, you'll get kind of a kick out of going back to this. Just don't expect a great story, don't expect a lot of scares, just kind of a simply entertaining movie. Alright, and then the third film for that night was this one's a bit more difficult to talk about, because despite its trailers, I was looking forward to it. And that was Return to Silent Hill, which came out just earlier this year in theaters. I know that response to the original 2006-2007 Silent Hill movie is kind of divisive, which is odd, because for years I only ever saw people say good about it, but nowadays you'll see some people who like to pretend oh, we hated it before it was cool to hate it. And I can only imagine part of that is because of where the sequel films led it, and kind of where the game series itself went for a while. But I mean, I really enjoyed the original film. I thought it did a great job capturing what I liked about those games, what I found, frightening and engaging about them. With my main caveat being that the original movie has just the dumbest ending. Like it's a lousy ending. What is that? Yeah. That's the joy of going for a walk while you do this. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that original film. I hated the sequel that came out, Revelations. That'll be a fun one to talk about one of these days. But with this one, the director of the original film is coming back, and he's a very interesting director. Outside of that, he did stuff like Brotherhood of the Wolf. Has a great eye for things, even if he doesn't always do the best with storytelling. But he was coming back. They were basing this new movie off of Silent Hill 2, which, who doesn't love that game? That's one of those rare games where I've played it so many times and I've never actually beaten it. But I still hold it in high regard. I just, I always tend to get sidetracked from it. But yeah, so that combination, yeah, everybody's excited for that. I mean, anybody who enjoys that first movie, yeah, you can help be a little bit interested. Some of the trailers start coming out, and it's obvious that this one is less expensive than the original, and using newer technology, oddly enough, looks phonier, because it has that kind of classic, like, almost like Netflix CG show kind of stuff going on. But I still kind of held up hope that, like, yeah, I may not enjoy it as much as the original. Can't be as bad as the second one. Still looking forward to it. And when we get there, I will say that the movie is not as bad as its current reputation would suggest, while still somehow almost being as bad as its reputation suggests. Because by the end of it, I could not tell you what they were really going for anymore. They had sort of like picked all directions and none for the final theme. And they even kind of put in a point where they almost eliminate the idea of there being a threat, which makes you wonder, like, then what am I watching? Like, if this person was never really under threat of anything, it's almost like the "it's all a dream" ending, but it's less decisive than that. So yeah, once again, its biggest undoing is its really, really bad ending. However, this one also has weaker acting, weaker visuals, just weaker storytelling across the board. And some of its swings that it tries to do too, because they don't just settle it for being a straightforward adaptation of Silent Hill 2. They decided to take a couple swings, which, you're going to have to at some point. Even at its shortest, the game storyline is longer than most movies. You have to cut things, you have to redo things, and you still want to surprise the audience. What they did, however, was still try to include everything from the game, all the key stuff, all the key characters, even if some of them just disappear without accomplishing anything. And then coming up with a way to link several of them that is just groan-worthy. So you have those, and then you insert a new plot line where the main character's dead wife was she was like a cult leader's daughter, and they kept doing weird mystical, like, trains on her, essentially. And yowza, it's unnecessary, and seemingly the only reason it's there is so that they can have something still spooky that doesn't cost much money, unlike the monsters and creatures, and even those suffer, because many of them are, for one, they're very short-changed. They'll be like, here's that monster for a scene. And the first movie did that a little bit as well, but they would still come with, like, Pyramid Head, came back several times throughout the film. So you get a glimpse of him to see what he's capable of, and then you see him again later, and you see him again later. So, you build up that threat. You'd get a monster that would appear in this movie for a very short scene, never appear again, and even its significance wouldn't make sense. And, they'll just go nowhere. And they won't harm the main character either. They won't. So, you just kind of like, oh, that was a cool looking thing, but what was the point? You just spent however many hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to pull this off, and it accomplished nothing but kind of confusing me. Yeah, so they don't do a great job then with the horror elements because they over-explain things. There's not enough threat level there. Heck, I'm trying to even think, like, the body count might only be like 2 or 3 people. Like, it is a very shrimpy and very restrained movie, especially for something based on Silent Hill. And one of my worst parts with representation, too, is when they bring Pyramid Head into this one. For some reason, he growls now. Like, he grunts and growls like a big strong man. And they will show you flashes inside of his helmet that just over-explain way too much the thematics of the story. Yeah, God, I'm actually making myself hate this movie more as I go. But yes, you know, you have bad storytelling choices, bad representation of the monsters on a lot of fronts. The presentation of the movie as a whole, like I said, is held back. And it's largely because, you know, I don't know why it is that if it's the cameras, if it's the tech, if it's both, why we can't get green screens and digital backgrounds and things like that to ever look good anymore. Because every time that James, our main character, is out in the world when, you know, Silent Hill's being extra creepy, it just looks like a swamp of CG crap. And you can, you know, the sets are that much more obviously sets. It's just that weird quirk of modern film production. And it's not great. We'll put it that way. It's kind of interesting that I went all this way. I didn't realize I didn't even get into actually the storyline of it. Which, I mean, it's probably for the best. It's the same, you know, setup as the game. This sad, kind of pathetic guy goes to Silent Hill, the place where he knew his wife, who is supposedly dead, but she wrote him a letter that he recently got, saying that she'd be in their special place, which their special place is the entire town. So he goes back there, and for anyone who's ever seen any sort of Silent Hill media, they know the town is a problem. So, yeah, James goes in looking for his wife, encounters other people, and yeah, most of it is just pointless. Even one of the most important characters from the original game, the Maria character, doesn't show up till I think 45 minutes into the movie, and then really is not in it very long. So most of the thematic elements of her existence don't go anywhere. It's just not, it's not a well done movie on so many fronts. So it was a pretty massive disappointment. I would still say, as a movie, it's probably not as bad as Revelations, because you at least have it where if you took Return to Silent Hill as its own movie, regardless of what it is as an adaptation or any of that, you'd still not be pleased with it as a movie, but you could write off more of its faults by some of its ambitions. So as something original, it would actually kind of hold a little bit of interest. It just doesn't as an adaptation. It still wouldn't be good, though. Revelation's case, even if it wasn't a Silent Hill movie, would still just be a bad movie. And so, yeah, of the 3 main features that night, yeah, Keep, absolutely fantastic. Everyone should check it out. Nightwatch, the remake, okay, passable, not great. And Return to Silent Hill that's something for completionists, sadists, or those who, like me, you've already watched everything, so why not? My 4th one that night that I mentioned I wouldn't be talking much about was Terror Out of the Sky. It's a late 70s TV killer bee film. I was basically just conked out by that point in the night. I mean, I can say that I've seen the movie, didn't process it. From what I've seen better bug attack movies from the 70s. I've seen worse bug attack movies from the 70s. But one day we'll have to come back to that and kind of figure out, like, hey, was that one actually anything worthwhile? So, but yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining me on the test episode. As I go, I'm going to look into getting a proper mic instead of just talking top volume while I walk like a crazy person. We're going to find different areas to walk, different times. And I may not always strictly talk about horror stuff. That's kind of my main goal, but I think on occasion we'll also talk about some of the books. I read plenty of horror novels as well as other things. Video games, sometimes, movies that aren't of the horror variety. But yeah, I kind of want to get you guys out, see some odd spots around mid-Michigan, and, talk about the stuff we love. So I hope you have a good night. Thanks for joining me.